Good morning, anyone who may be listening. It's a beautiful day here in Albion, and the garden's looking great, I think. It needs quite a bit of work, but it just looks good for the time being, and the trees are looking fine, and the leaves are opening, and the weather forecast is very good. But I have very little incentive to do anything. I suppose I get influenced by the world around me, really. And something that had come to my mind, and it frustrates me, is the way that some people never change their opinion. And there's quite a lot of those people. And so when I understand that somebody won't change their opinion and never does, then I'm unlikely to engage with them because it's pointless. You see, I find it odd because, over the past 20, I change my opinion constantly about many things. I only discovered the name of the King of Kings around 10 years ago. And that, if you could call it an opinion, that's been constant over 10 years. So you could say, well, you're guilty of the same kind of fixed mindset. But that's part and parcel, I think, of my understanding. If I could find any reason to shuck it off, then that would change things. But I have looked since I first read the Bible. I've read it many times, and I read it all the time, in fact. And all I find is greater depth. I don't find anything that indicates to me that it's a lie. Whereas in all other things, I find those things very quickly. They're quite evident. I was listening to a feminist prostitute, ex-prostitute, speaking at a feminist convention this morning. And the interviewer asked her how she got out of prostitution. She didn't want to be a prostitute, and how did she manage to break free? And she said, well, I finished my university and I got a job. So you've used prostitution to pay for your university course. Normally your father would have done that perhaps, but maybe he couldn't afford to, or maybe he's abandoned the household, as does often occur. And maybe the family's very poor. Or maybe she wanted a lifestyle that wouldn't be compatible with a small allowance. I don't know what the reasons may have been. Perhaps there was just a genuine hardship, but you don't have to go to university. People do it because they consider it to be an investment. Whether primarily economic, I would say, but you could say, well, it's an investment in understanding, but they're very selective about what they will approach. And yet the feminists saw this admission of being something heartbreaking, that she'd been forced into this lifestyle which she didn't enjoy. Well, I'm not surprised. But, I guess a lot of men don't enjoy going off to war. That's one option that we've always had. I mean, any young man with military training can become a mercenary. I suppose that's a kind of an equivalent in men. Or anyway, may feel obliged to undertake dangerous work because of the financial rewards available. So, it's just economics, really. That's what it is. But the trouble is that people don't change. I have friends that I've known, or I'm not really in touch with them now, but people that I've known for all of my life. And all the time that I've known them, they've never changed their mind about anything that I can detect in terms of their philosophical and political and religious convictions. It's odd that people don't do that. What is it? Are they NPCs, non-player characters who are walking among us? They can be infuriating, if you try to reason, because they're just impervious to it. It's not the language that they speak. They speak a language of ideas that they have accepted and don't question. That's very different from the Christian walk. We question all the time. We search the scriptures. That's the nature of the Christian walk, and they're very challenging. The scriptures are tremendously deep, and you can arrive at some quite starkly different conclusions. So, our powers of reason become very critical. But what a joy it is to speak to somebody who's searching. But I think when people get to be my age, or probably younger as well, many times they just have an idea of the world and they've formed it in childhood, perhaps, and it remains fairly static. And I've noticed that this problem seems to have become more intense following the vaccination rollout. I think people who've taken that have been spiritually altered. I think this is the danger. Now, whether it's all of them or not, I wouldn't like to make that claim. Perhaps they were already spiritually compromised. And I say that because I have a very devout Christian friend who took a couple of shots and seems to have been unaffected by them. If anything, a calmer man than he was once. But I'm no medical expert. But I've noticed a greater level of anger and reactiveness, and so I really do. Once I understand that a person holds those very fixed views, I'm quite careful of how I'm always try to be careful. I'm sure everybody is, but if you feel that there's some flexibility, then you can be more open. But even there's plenty of apparently flexible thinkers around, and I find that I have many touch points with some people that I do meet. But as any conversation develops, I realize that I'm speaking to what's it called? A kind of that rigor mortis has set in their understanding epistemology. It looks complex, but in actual fact, it's surrounded by tripwires and it can't be altered. It just gives the appearance of living, breathing, and thinking person, but really you're speaking to something like a bot, very consistent and unwilling to touch certain topics and certain areas, just producing auto responses, learned auto responses. I don't speak to people in the street to go to school. To me, it's a possibility of a human connection. So in Britain, we are now being inundated with immigrants, apparently, and they call them illegal immigrants. And they come over in boats, we're told. And that enables them to evade the passport control system. So there's no need to send them back. But instead, they're actually housed, looked after. These are clearly, they're not illegal immigrants. They're military personnel being brought in this country and being prepared for battle. And people are being whipped up into a frenzy by the most draconian and unjust behaviors from any authority that can be perceived, and making people mad. And the madness is orchestrated carefully by key politicians and, I would say, vloggers also. You've got, again, I'd have to make some exceptions, but it's rather hard to find them. And while I'm on the subject of vloggers, I'd like to just come clean and say that I recommended John Lord one time and said he was a Christian, and since then he's come out as a Gnostic. So I do have to, I certainly wouldn't have recommended him if I'd known that he's not a follower of Christ. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing, really. Very good and sort of charming gentleman. His relationship with his dog, to me, is a bit of a red flag, because he has a beautiful German Shepherd called Chief, and they go everywhere together. And there's a lot of video footage that he uses. To me, that suggests the Gnostic understanding is close, isn't it, to that? It's a pantheistic rapport that you would have with the animal. We don't really find it in the Bible, although, of course, we are gentle men and women, and we treat animals respectfully, but not as companions. That's the problem. That's the risk with it. They're not people, and it's not respecting them, I think, to treat them as people. Actually, I've seen many dogs that lie on sofas and make a mess of the home when they would be far better served in a cage in the garden, where the temperature is more in keeping with their coat and they are fulfilling a useful duty. I mean, in a cage or loose in the garden, I suppose, as long as the garden is secure. But a kennel is the old way of keeping a dog, and that's what I always had. You make a kennel, you put some blankets in it, you make it as a warm space protected from the wind. And most breeds of dogs will be perfectly happy. most breeds. Of course, if you purchase something exotic, then you might have to be careful. But that's the fact of the matter. We're being led astray by all media. It doesn't matter where you look, even religious communities. You have to be so careful of what is truly being said. The subtext. Our God is not just a collection of memes. We have a spiritual and a deep relationship with Jesus Christ, and it can't somehow be reproduced digitally, maybe, because it's personal. So that's a very good reason for not listening to anybody like me. But I fancied having a chat this morning. I was feeling somewhat downtrodden. I think, well, I don't know whether caused by, but certainly aided and abetted by the general negative news, the lack of money and the lack of understanding in the land. So these military personnel are being brought in for the battle of Gog and Magog, which will be waged against the people of God. This is what's going to happen. I think that's fairly clear. And the climate is the stage is being set for it. They have a role to play, and they're controlled they're controlled by God, of course, but they're under the direction of different spiritual entities. So those will be exciting times. Whether I will live to see them or not, I really don't know. But to me, that's the backdrop. That's what's happening. And it's inevitably drawing towards this final battle that will be fought against us, and in which we will triumph. We will triumph because we have the Lord Jesus Christ on our side. And really, I'm doubtful of whether a shot need be fired. We don't anyway have any form of weapon in Britain. We're like the Smiths. They were taken out from among our people by our rulers. So we couldn't make weapons. Well, I'm a Smith, and I feel that very keenly. But I think in this final battle, the weapon will be the Word of God, because none can stand against it. God bless this morning.